Taking no chances. Dozens of people who made contact with an Ebola victim in the U.S. are being closely watched. Time to act. Turkey's parliament expected to vote on joining the U.S.-led coalition against the Islamic State. Deacons by the dozen. 43 new American deacons are ordained at St. Peter's Basilica. And Following the Beast, a documentary tracking the long, illegal journey of immigrants to the U.S. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, October 2nd, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. An Ebola victim hangs on to life tonight in Dallas. Hospital officials say his condition has improved, but he's still in serious, stable condition. He has a virus that's killed 3,300 people, most of them in West Africa. Jason Calvi is here now with the story. Jason?
Brian, Liberian officials are planning to prosecute this man, the American Ebola victim. He's been accused of lying on an airport questionnaire. When asked if he had any contact with an infected person, his answer was no. Now the question is, did he know he was in touch with Ebola?
The first person to bring Ebola to America is Thomas Eric Duncan. His family says they're concerned.
His mom is in there crying for his son. I'm worried about my brother, and I'm over here trying to figure out what to do.
The answer may come from here, Duncan's neighborhood in Monrovia, Liberia. The people here say Duncan helped a 19-year-old pregnant neighbor. She later died from Ebola.
This is how the lady that was pregnant died.
We've been interacting because none of us in the yard knew. We have all been visiting each other, and no one knows that they have the virus.
Duncan later flew from Liberia through Brussels and Washington, D.C. to Dallas. Texas health officials say he may have come in contact with as many as 100 people, including 5 children. They've now pulled them from these schools. School leaders urged calm, saying none of the kids have shown symptoms.
We just got letters in the kids' backpack yesterday saying that they have it basically under control, but I feel, otherwise, because if you really had it under control, the kid wouldn't have came to school in the first place, but you'll never know.
Some parents pulled their kids from Dallas schools, but not Yasmin Scott.
I'm a parent. I have to go to work. I have school, full-time student, and I have to make a decision. They have to go to school.
She leaves her son with advice.
Make sure you wash your hands.
And we also learned today that 4 members of Duncan's family who were originally not complying with quarantine restrictions have been ordered to stay in their home, and Bryan police are there to make sure they follow that order.
Shocking developments. Thank you, Jason. And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Time is running out in Hong Kong on the ultimatum that student protesters issued to the Chinese government. Demonstrators threaten to move into government buildings if the city's leader doesn't step down. Such a move would likely escalate the situation, possibly leading to violence. Protest leaders say it may be necessary to get the attention of the government and the change they're demanding. The Chinese government calls the protests illegal and says 83 people have been injured because of them. The Turkish parliament votes to authorize the use of military force against ISIS fighters in Syria and Iraq. Until now, Turkey has declined to join a U.S.-led coalition, even though Turkey is a member of NATO. But now, with ISIS on its doorstep and tens of thousands fleeing across its border, things have changed. Reports that the tomb of the grandfather of the founder of the Ottoman Empire has been surrounded is motivating the Turks to act. That tomb is considered a Turkish enclave, despite its location inside Syria. As part of a 1921 treaty, Turkey was allowed to keep the tomb, guard it, and raise a Turkish flag over it. NATO's new chief says the alliance is committed to protecting Turkey if Turkey comes under attack. Islamic State terrorists are on the move, overrunning even more of northern Iraq and Syria. Iraqi officials say ISIS fighters have taken over the town of Heat. Iraqi military helicopters are carrying out airstrikes against militant positions there. The militants also now have the city of Kobani almost entirely surrounded. Civilians are being ordered to evacuate. Smaller villages surrounding the city are already under ISIS control. An estimated 3,000 civilians are reportedly waiting to cross the border into Turkey at one single checkpoint. To combat ISIS, Israeli settlers living in the West Bank are rejecting the Obama administration's criticism of plans for a new housing project in East Jerusalem. The White House says the settlement would raise questions about Israel's commitment to seeking peace with Palestinians. An advisor to the Palestinian president called for the U.S. to act to stop Israeli settlement building in East Jerusalem.
All what Israel really intends to do is to change the demographic structure of Jerusalem. This is a process of the Judaization of Jerusalem, and this is an effort in the face of all the international efforts to really resume and achieve peace in the region. I think it is time for Washington to take all the necessary measures to really stop Israel from settlement construction, and it is not enough only to make statements.
What I'm saying to the Americans, don't be too hasty. Don't reject it up front.
The new 2,500 unit project would complete a band of Jewish areas that separate Jerusalem from nearby Bethlehem. The Palestinians want the UN Security Council to set a deadline of November 2016 for Israel to withdraw from all occupied Palestinian territory. Today, Pope Francis begins 2 days of talks with nuncios of Middle Eastern countries. They include his representatives in Egypt, Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey. The theme of the meeting is the presence of Christians in the Middle East. The Holy Father expressed deep concern over terrorism, which he says holds human lives to have no value. The pontiff also mentioned the problem of arms trafficking and the humanitarian needs of those who are forced to flee. Francis called for solidarity of all the church towards the Christians of the Middle East. He expressed support for international response to the needs of the many people suffering in the region. Former President George W. Bush is raising expectations about his brother Jeb running for president. On Fox News today, Bush said he thinks his brother wants to run for president, but hasn't made a final decision. The former president says Jeb is weighing his options. The two Bushes recently spoke about Jeb's political future in an event honoring veterans. Some polls show Jeb Bush as an early frontrunner if he does get into the race. Well, in the end, it may have been keeping a secret that cost the Secret Service director her job. Julia Pearson did not tell President Obama he rode in an elevator with an armed security contractor in Atlanta last month. The president didn't learn of the security breach until just before the incident was published by the press. Pearson offered her resignation yesterday. Former Special Agent Joseph Clancy takes over now as the temporary Secret Service director. Pearson's resignation comes on the heels of a series of security breaches. In 2009, a prominent couple gets past a security checkpoint at President Obama's first state dinner. Congress held hearings. No charges were filed. In 2011, gunshots fired at the White House, at least one bullet piercing a window on the third floor. It took 4 days until that punctured window was discovered by a housekeeper. In 2012, a Secret Service agent met a prostitute in Colombia just days before President Obama was to arrive for a South American summit. And now in 2013, the Secret Service let a fake interpreter on stage with President Obama during Nelson Mandela's memorial in Africa. And finally, just last month, a man wielding a knife jumped the White House fence, sprinted across the lawn, and entered the White House through unlocked doors. It's good to have Susan Crabtree from the Washington Examiner back with us. She's the White House correspondent for the Examiner. You broke a big story. How on earth did you find out that the president had been in an elevator with an armed security guard who had a record?
Well, I don't usually get into my sourcing, but I do think the series of stories that the Washington Post has done and I have done reflects a broader frustration within the agency and outside of the agency because of all of these security breaches, and there's low morale, and people within the agency and in Congress and in the outside world really want a shakeup. They really want some soul searching.
So this was a guy who was hired by the building, I guess, for security, and he is allowed on the elevator with the president and I assume Secret Service agents.
That's right. He was a private contractor, a security officer that the CDC hired. He was, at that point in time, he was supposed to be operating the elevator for President Obama and his detail. And his detail, when they were leaving, everything was going fine. When the president was leaving, he started videotaping him. The Secret Service agents told him to stop, and he did not stop. That's when they collected him, interviewed him in a private room, and discovered he had a gun. His supervisor fired him on the spot.
So how much of a role did that incident play, do you think, in Julia Pearson's resignation versus what happened at the White House just recently?
Well, we did have a briefing with White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest, and he said it wasn't until the president didn't know about it until the press report started. And so that was my report first, and then the Washington Post. So that, I think, when the president doesn't know about something that serious, I think that's a problem, and he lost confidence.
It's a problem, and it's a problem when they turn down alarms that are supposed to alert them of an intruder in the White House. What is the culture within the Secret Service at the White House that's allowing these things to happen?
Well, I want to say that the Secret Service, they're just amazing heroes, everyday heroes.
They are.
First say that. They have a harder job than I do, but really, much harder. But really, sources tell me that there is a culture of cover-up within the Secret Service, and that they are doing things like they're operating like a family. So they're trying to protect people, and sometimes it gets a little dysfunctional.
What will the leadership of Joe Clancy look like? Is it just a space holder, or is he going to take command?
I think that he's going to be providing some continuity. Yesterday with the briefing, we heard suggestions from the White House that they would like an outside person for the first time in the agency's very long history, and since 1932, as an outside person might be considered for the top job.
And I totally agree with you. This is a difficult job, and certainly I'm sure there are many very diligent Secret Service agents. But as an agency, what questions are still out there that are going to have to be answered here?
I think that there are a lot of questions that deserves far more scrutiny. First of all, how did the guy get in the elevator? I'm focused on that. Why did the security firm hire him if he had a criminal record? What was the criminal record? I've heard that it's assault charges from the 1990s. They were stale.
And why wasn't he investigated before?
Exactly. And they do extensive investigations, the Secret Service, in advance work, well before the president ever gets to a location.
Well, I'm looking forward to reading your follow-up reports in the Examiner. Susan Crabtree, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Brian.
Coming up, a shipwreck victim's loved one meets with Pope Francis. We hear his story. And they may be old men now, but the pressure is on to bring suspected Nazis to justice. On Thursday, October 2nd, this is EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick. The annual pilgrimage to Mecca begins today for the world's Muslims. More than 3 million people take part in this year's Hajj. They gather around the cube-shaped Kaaba as part of the 5-day spiritual journey. In Saudi Arabia, authorities have denied visas to pilgrims from parts of West Africa, hoping to avoid spreading the Ebola virus. Zulekha Hussain is a DC-based journalist who grew up in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. Now, your parents took you on Hajj when you were a kid. You've been back 5 times. How has Mecca changed in all those years?
Oh, drastically. It's completely different now. When I was doing Hajj the first time, I was 2 years old, and back then it was only 1 million people, and it felt a very small community. We could get close to the Kaaba if you wanted. I mean, it's the house of God. People, when they're making the pilgrimage there, they want to be as close to it as possible. It's very different now. You can't even attempt getting close. As Catholics, we are familiar with pilgrimage. We make pilgrimage. Is that what Hajj is for Muslims? It is the annual pilgrimage. It is the 5th pillar, but there's a caveat. Once in a lifetime, a Muslim has to go for Hajj, but only and only if they can afford it, if they have the money. I mean, just going from America right now, it costs an average package is about $7,000 to $14,000. So if you can't afford it? If you can't afford it, you don't need to. But it is a goal. It is a goal. It is a goal for a lot of people. If they can't make it for the annual yearly pilgrimage, then at least they'll want to go any of the rest of the times. It's called the lesser pilgrimage, the Umrah. So they can do that as well. It's relatively easier to do that. Well, how would this be, though, for the people in West Africa who are not able to go because of the Ebola virus? That's right. That's a concern this time around. The thing is, it's only been banned in like 3 countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea. And Nigeria, which usually brings in a lot of Muslim pilgrims, they've actually allowed for about 76,000 pilgrims from there. So I've got to ask you, though, that with selfies now, some pilgrims are taking selfies near the Kaaba. Is that okay, or is that disrespectful? Well, a lot of people, I saw some clerics saying that that's completely not right, and you should concentrate on the actual rituals and the self-purification and the struggle and the journey. I think trying to capture the moment sometimes might lose the actual moment itself. Mm-hmm. But I mean, when I was there, I took a picture, and this was back in the 90s. I was still taking pictures, even though at the time they were trying to strictly, not allow you. nowadays you can't not allow anyone. So I feel like this is just a...
We have a lot of pilgrims taking selfies with Pope Francis
do.
at the Vatican, and really we appreciate you being with us, and thank you for sharing that insight with our listeners and our viewers.
Thank you for having me.
All right, there are several dozen new American transitional deacons, future priests, ordained today at Rome's St. Peter's and Basilica. The Basilica of St. Peter's. Washington, D.C.'s Cardinal Donald Wuerl presided over the rite and Mass for these 43 men. They're from dioceses all over North America, also Australia. They all attend Rome's Pontifical North American College. These men joined 7 of their classmates ordained ahead of them this summer. That brings the total number of new deacons to 50. Every year, the North American College holds the rite in St. Peter's Basilica. It's considered one of the most important events in the life of the college during the year. Thousands of people have died or are missing in the Mediterranean Sea this past year, according to UN figures. They're typically migrants from Africa trying to reach Europe. After meeting with Pope Francis this week, one man who made a similar journey and lost a family member to the sea spoke with our Alan Holdren in Rome.
1 year ago tomorrow, a boat full of refugees went down off the Italian coast. It claimed 368 lives. This man lost his brother in the shipwreck.
My name is Adal, and I am from Sweden. Originally, I am from Eritrea.
This week, Adal and 40 other survivors of the Lampedusa tragedy made their way to Rome to ask Pope Francis for help.
Your Holiness, we have some other questions. If it is possible to gather the bodies together here in Rome, so that we have one and common place to pray for them.
For the Pope, it was an emotional encounter.
Perché sento cose che non si possono dire.
I feel things that cannot be said. Months before the boatload of asylum seekers went down, Pope Francis visited the island of Lampedusa. It was his first trip outside of Rome as Pope. There, he asked for others to look at the refugee as their brother. At this week's meeting, he prayed with the refugees that Europeans would open the doors of their hearts. For Adal and the other survivors who fled their home countries for Europe, they're thankful for the meeting and for the Pope's attention. What did the Pope say to you?
He promised that he can do everything he can to help us.
Tomorrow, the refugees will return to Lampedusa to honor those that didn't make it. In Rome, Alan Holdren, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, Catholic Relief Services was ahead of the curve in identifying the surge of illegal immigrants from Central America. And a boy holds on to his dreams of playing in the big leagues after suffering a paralyzing illness. On EWTN News Nightly, more than 500 people in 42 states are now sickened by enterovirus D68. Cases of the respiratory illness have spiked in the last couple of weeks. Catherine Elliott now reports that doctors suspect it's paralyzing some of its victims, including young children.
Sports fan Will Baker is 8 years old, minutes older than his twin Emma, a piano player, a right-handed infielder who several weeks ago suddenly lost the use of his throwing arm.
It's heartbreaking because there's so many things he does so well that he needs his right arm for.
The San Diego third grader is one of the latest children in the United States, some clustered in Colorado and Massachusetts, to suffer from weakness in limbs, neurological illness, and cranial nerve dysfunction.
Not knowing was definitely the hardest part for me.
After weeks of agonizing tests, the doctors told Will's parents he had a
positive nose swab for the enteroviral virus.
Like others, Will's sickness started with respiratory symptoms before weak limbs brought him to the hospital. The Centers for Disease Control are now asking America's hospitals to look out for similar cases of the virus that might link it to paralysis. Without many answers, Will's parents are thinking of his future.
We just have to look at the positive, and he's here, and start teaching him how to write stories and do sports with his left hand.
Will's fingers on his limp right hand still move well enough for him to play piano.
It's just amazing, and he's inspiring at the same time.
Doctors say Will may not regain full use of his right arm, but Will still says he dreams of playing first base in the major leagues. Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Ginger Wolfe is a filmmaker producing A Bridge Apart. That's a documentary about the dangerous journey to the U.S. from Central America. And Celia Rivas is an immigration attorney for Catholic Charities. So tell us about the field work that you did involving Catholic Relief Services to begin this documentary work.
I had taken a trip with them way back in 2008. It was 2 weeks. We went to Central America, and I saw there what became the beginning of the story for A Bridge Apart. The extraordinary poverty, but even more, the suffering that they go through to come to this country and why they have that push factor.
Ginger, the media picked up on this past year, this big surge of unaccompanied minors, but Catholic Relief Services was well ahead of that curve, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we were, and I appreciate you noting that. But a lot of people never knew about this train. I mean, the people that work there.
The Beast, they call
it. The Beast, La Bestia, that's right. They knew about it, but it just wasn't very common. And it was the same when I came back and started to finish the film. It was hard to get the attention of the media to pay attention.
Celia, you work with these immigrants on the other end, here in the D.C. area. How many of these unaccompanied minors get this far?
Well, if we want to know reports from January through July of 2014, the Office of Refugee and Resettlement has practically released 37,000 throughout the United States, okay? In the D.C. metropolitan area, we have in D.C. Approximately 400, in Virginia around 3,900, and in Maryland we have 2,800 kids who have been released.
And where do they stay?
Well, what we have to understand is the fact that some of these kids, once they are released by the Office of Refugee and Resettlement, they are either with a parent or a custodian, okay? But we also have some other kids who are still under the custody of the U.S. government because there is no one identified in the United States. So those kids are going to go under probably the foster care system.
And so the Catholic Church is really involved here. Catholic Relief Services internationally, Catholic Charities here domestically. What role does Catholic Charities play in this?
Well, I represent Catholic Charities Immigration Legal Services, so we do have it's like a 3-area service that we are providing at this point. We have the legal orientation program for parents and custodians under a contract with the Executive Office of Immigration Relief. We also provide direct legal services, and we do have a pro bono panel when we are practically so overwhelmed and we are unable to do direct legal representation.
So getting back to Ginger, as you produce the documentary, describe what you've seen and what you think might be a solution to this, politics aside.
What I saw and what struck me the most was, first of all, the extraordinary poverty. I had no idea that the poverty was that great in a country that was, you know, a stone's throw from where we are across our borders. But the violence has increased considerably in sense even when since I finished the film. What's the solution? Catholic Relief Services is trying to do, you know, education, and it's an organization called Youth Build to help the kids. But I think the awareness here for people to understand will go a long way across the whole spectrum.
Celia?
Yeah, I would say that we need to understand the fact that these children are fleeing violence. It's not just I think the regular immigrant who is coming to just improve the quality of life. These kids have been traumatized. According to the interviews that we have had with every kid, there is an issue of violence in their lives. We have seen gang-related activities that they have been traumatized because of that, because they wanted to be recruited. They are fleeing because the gang members want to recruit them. In other circumstances, we had seen children who have been in forms of just practically a lot of abuse.
Yeah, so they're fleeing from real danger, yes. Much like many of our ancestors who came to America at whatever point they did. Celia Rivas with Catholic Charities and filmmaker Ginger Wolfe, we appreciate both of you joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for joining us tonight. Until tomorrow, I'm Brian Patrick. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, good night, and may God bless you.